Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. We're looking at the Subtlety Rogue. Oh, we're getting subby. Yeah, the most classic of the rogue specs. It definitely involves a lot of stealth, a lot of being sneaky, a lot of Ninja Gaiden style. I really love it for that. I really do love it for that. It was one of my worst specs in Cataclysm. I didn't enjoy sub at all in Cataclysm. I thought it was quite a fiddly playstyle. It changed a little bit on beta, and the final product, I have to say, I'm very happy with. I've tried it out in a couple of instances, and I've been more than impressed. More than impressed with how sub plays out now. Let's jump into the talents for you guys. Sub, we get Backstab, Hemorrhage. We get a choice between Backstab and Hemorrhage. Now, the Backstab issue, of course, it requires you to be behind the target. They've rebalanced it, so Hemorrhage spam, should you be unable to get behind the target, is not actually too much worse. So don't worry too much about that at all. If you can't get behind the target, your DPS will not suffer that much. Of course, it'll suffer in some way, but not a great deal. Our big DPS cooldown is Shadow Dance, allowing us access to our stealth abilities while we're still in combat and fighting those mobs on an only 1 minute cooldown. And Find Weakness. Find Weakness is going to be the key to making or breaking your ability to use the sub-spec. Your Ambush, Garrote and Cheap Shot abilities reveal a flaw in your target's defenses, causing all your attacks to bypass 70% of that target's armor. I just want to point out very quickly in terms of a DPS macro. People like macroing stuff together. Realize that Find Weakness gives you a 70% ignore armor. Our other big DPS cooldown, which is Shadow Blades, causes us to ignore all armor. Using these two together, such as Shadow Dance and Shadow Blaze together, is not effective. You want them on separate key bindings, guys. Separate key bindings, because you will just get a waste of being able to use that ignore armor potential that you get from Shadow Blades or from your Find Weakness. They do not stack, which is kind of sad. But just make sure you're not macroing Shadow Dance and Shadow Blades together. Don't do that. That would be very bad. Let's go to our talents. Now, for sub, we're going to be very different from, say, Assassination and Combat in terms of most of our damage is not poison-based. Poison, of course, provides us with good damage, but we're also doing a lot of beneficial damage from our actual physical attacks. Therefore, Subterfuge is generally the best thing you can do to get a good DPS advantage with this spec. Your stealth breaks 3 seconds after dealing or receiving hostile actions rather than doing so immediately. Ambush is our most vital attack. Ambush hits like an absolute Optimus Prime kick in the teeth. See, 70k. Nothing better than getting a nice ambush crit to demonstrate that point. We get 70ks. With Subterfuge, we are able to do 2 ambushes at least before we come out of stealth, which is always awesome. It is always the best thing we can ever do. You want to pick up Subterfuge. It's going to be the best. In terms of the next tier, pick anything you really want. Deadly Throw is something you can use in PvE sometimes. Combat Readiness is a nice defensive cooldown. It's situational at best. None of these are going to affect your DPS, so it doesn't really matter. Same with the next tier. Are you going to get something that can kill the raid? Cheat Death. Are you going to get, well, of course, Cheat Death now only based on your entire health pool, but you know what I mean. If it's something that's very, very dangerous, Cheat Death is going to be the way to go. Constant incoming damage, Leeching Poison is the winner. And Elusiveness, if you have some regular big AoE or big stomping crash or big bomb going off, that you can reduce that damage by 30% with Feint. So be aware, again, it's your choice depending on what you're doing. Next step is a DPS increase. Now, more so than when we discussed the Assassination video, preparation is far more important now, as we can get back into stealth and put up our Find Weakness buff again. Remember, ambush hits like an absolute truck. Therefore, preparation becomes far more important. It is literally pretty much the only choice to take for a sub-rogue is to get your preparation, to get an extra vanish in there, to get an extra Find Weakness and more ambushes. It is a far more significant DPS increase than any other spec. It really is. Preparation is pretty vital to the sub-spec, so get used to using it. If you are doing tons and tons of mobility and you're not getting the best use out of that vanish, then of course Shadow Step might be the way to go for you guys. The next one, again, is no form of DPS increase whatsoever. Pick whatever you think. Again, if we're doing some farming, then Prey in the Weak is pretty cool. Dirty Tricks is also really cool if we have to do some emergency CC. And Paralytic Poison has its uses as well. No big DPS increases from these either. None at all, in fact. So just pick whatever you want. So again, Prey in the Weak, some bosses are stunnable. So I don't want to leave you blind on this one. 10% extra damage is a lot from all sources, especially when it comes to the raid. There are some situations where you can stun things and really get a nice big burst window, especially if you've got things like Bloodlust, Heroism going on, all those kind of things. So be aware, that's why I take Prey of the Week. It's just a nice big flat out damage buff should we need it. Your level 90s, again, Shuriken Toss is the weakest one. You have to be stood away from the boss for a majority of the time in order to get the bonus from Shuriken Toss. Versatility isn't as great for sub as you would think, especially even if you're swapping targets due to Honor Among Thieves. But again, Honor Among Thieves makes Anticipation even more impressive. Anticipation giving us the ability to store up extra combo points so they don't get wasted. We do have the ability Honor Among Thieves. Let me bring it up for you guys so you can see what the hell I'm talking about. If you're new to the sub rogue, I want you to be aware of this. Honor Among Thieves. When any player in your party or raid critically hits with a spell or ability, you gain extra combo points on your current target. This effect cannot occur more than once every 2 seconds and can only occur while you're in combat. This means that we're going to be generating extra combo points essentially every 2 seconds. For nothing. Just going to be getting them from other people behaving. This is one of the reasons it's very difficult to test sub on training dummies. So be aware of that. You won't get real accurate results from training dummies because of Honor Among Thieves. You're going to get a lot more combo points in your dungeons. Now, that relates to how sub works in its rotation. We'll talk about that later in the video. To how we keep up debuffs and so on and so forth. Let's talk about our glyphs. One reasonably mandatory glyph, which is the glyph of Ambush, increases the range by 5. Just allows us to attack that boss, that mob, that whatever, that little bit earlier. And the more time we have DPSing the boss, the more DPS we do. It all comes down to the fact that we are DPSing for a longer period of time. While we're moving into that boss, we can get an extra 5 yards on our ambush, increasing our overall DPS. So I would really recommend you pick that up. Cloak of Shadows, again, a physical damage reduction is always helpful should we pull aggro for whatever reason. Should be using tricks either way, but just in case, be aware of that. Glyph of Deadly Momentum, I keep it around me. It refreshes my slice and dice on occasion. That's always handy. It's just another thing I don't have to worry about. But pretty much anything you want to pick up here is pretty cool. Nothing to worry about whatsoever. Let's talk about Reforging. Okay, Reforging is very different from Assassination in Combat. In this one, we're going to see that we can't really... If you were an Assassination Rogue and you love using your daggers, this is a dagger-based spec. Of course, we've got Backstab, attacking with daggers from behind. Then you might think, oh, I want to go sub on this fight. Sub has the potential, thanks to Fine Weakness, of being one of the most bursty specs in the game. With a combination of preparation, vanish, and so on and so forth, we can pull off a seriously large amount of ambushes in a very short period of time. Which means that sub is generally used when something needs to die super quick at a specific time. Sub always wins in those cases. Think about Spider, Deathwing, Heroic. A lot of subtlety rogues brought to that fight for that reason. The Reforging is very different. So if you're generally rolling Assassination and you want to switch to sub for a particular boss, you're going to need to Reforge because the stats are completely switched up, okay? In Assassination, we saw that Mastery was king. Agility, overall king. You can see, again, we are gemming for pure agility. It is the winning stat for both of those specs and, of course, for the others. We just want to say that Mastery is the weakest of all the stats for a sub-rogue. What in fact is the best is Haste. After your hit and expertise caps. You can get slightly under the expertise cap still. Hit cap has been far more normalised. Only 1 rating over the cap there, so that's in really good shape. Expertise needs a little bit of work, but nothing major. We are looking for as much haste as possible. Haste, of course, is a horrific stat for Assassination. Mastery would be king. And now Mastery is a horrible stat. So your priorities when you're reforging, guys, get your hit and expertise caps. You need those. They're very, very important. There is no bigger DPS increase than getting your hit and expertise cap. After that, you want as much haste as possible. As you can see, we've put as much haste as we can on every single item. You see haste, 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 haste. We've gone for as much haste as we can possibly get. Mastery out of haste on that trinket. We've gone for more haste there, haste there. We've gone for as much haste as we can get. After that, it's crit. Your worst stat by far for the sub-rogue is, of course, Mastery. Get rid of as much Mastery as you can. If you have an item with Mastery, that is your first item to reforge. You want hit, you want expertise, then you want haste, then you want crit just behind that. Mastery, get rid of it as much as humanly possible. Try and find items that don't have Mastery on them. They don't really benefit you at all. Let's talk about rotation. You guys always want to know the rotation. Obviously, we're starting in stealth because we need to do some ambushes. And obviously, we've got the extra ability to do extra attacks while we're stealth. So we can pull off 2 ambushes. Why we're still stealth. You see I pulled off the 2 ambushes? Very cool. We then want Slice and Dice on. Slice and Dice is regaining us energy now. We have an ability called Energetic Recovery. You can see now on the tooltip regaining 8 energy every 2 seconds. So Slice and Dice, more than vital than ever. We also need to keep up our Hemorrhage buff. Hemorrhage is giving us a nice extra bleed. Again, it's not too much damage behind Backstab. Therefore, getting this damage up and getting the bleed is a bonus. It's not a great deal of damage. You can see we're 619. But it's still extra damage. So we want to keep the Hemorrhage buff up as much as possible. We then want to keep Slice and Dice on. And then we're going to be Backstab filling in order to get up to 5 combo points. And then we're going to be throwing Rupture on. Now, Rupture is benefiting from an ability called Sanguinary Vein. Let's say it is. Sanguinary Vein. Increase the damage of your Rupture ability by 50%, so it does actual damage. You see a 20k crit there, not bad at all. And causes you to deal 20% additional damage to targets afflicted by your Rupture, Garrote, or Crimson Tempest. So we need Rupture on for that 20% additional damage. Very important that we keep Rupture and Slice and Dice on at all times. Now, Slice and Dice does not replenish or refresh automatically from anything as sub. So we literally need to be managing this ourselves, which then brings us on to Honor Among Thieves. It can feel, if you're trying to test sub on a training dummy, that you just don't have enough combo points coming in. It can feel that way. That's okay, because in a party or raid environment, you will, thanks to Honor Among Thieves, you'll make it very easy to manage your Slice and Dice and your Rupture, and that's why anticipation then becomes more and more important, okay? Very, very easy stuff to remember. Other than that, we're going to use as many cooldowns as we can. We have Shadow Dance on a 1-minute cooldown, and Shadow Blades, again, on a 3-minute cooldown. We don't want to use them together, as I just said. So a general opener, let me just get out of combat here. I'll just Spanish. Is we're going to be opening up with ambushes. Ambush. Ambush. Then you want to get your Slice and Dice on. Then you want to go into your Backstab, get your Hemorrhage buff on. Go into maximum DPS, get your Rupture on. Now we're tracking this Fine Weakness. You can see here, Fine Weakness, 2 seconds left, 1 second left. Now one of the key aspects of doing best DPS as this rogue, I'm going to go into Shadow Dance now, is get my ambushes on. Our filler is Eviscerate. Is we do not want to use things like Shadow Dance, where we get this immense amount of extra DPS, while we need to refresh things like Rupture, okay, and Slice and Dice, because they do not benefit from the fact that we are in this mode. They really do not. They do not benefit whatsoever. So we want to time our Shadow Dance and our Shadow Dance, I should say, for the moment when we do not need to refresh Slice and Dice and Rupture, and preferably watch your energy. Make sure you've got enough energy to spam that ambush and those Eviscerates while you're in Shadow Dance. It's going to be the key to doing awesome DPS, guys. You need to have Rupture on a nice duration, Slice and Dice on a nice duration, and some good energy. Then Shadow Dance and spam that ambush and Eviscerate to your heart's content, and you will get crazy amounts of burst, taking full advantage of that Find Weakness buff as well. Rupture takes no benefit from Find Weakness. You just want to be spamming ambush and Eviscerate while you're in your Shadow Dance. Very important. After that, use your Shadow Blades. Get that used as soon as possible. And then as soon as our Find Weakness runs out, we want to be vanishing, getting back into stealth, getting Find Weakness up again, doing maximum amounts of DPS. Come out of that, Find Weakness has wore off again. We can then prep and vanish again. And then we do all this over and over again. And then by then, your Shadow Dance is back off cooldown, which gives you this window of tremendous burst. Absolutely insane amounts of burst. I'm going to put the poisons back on. Every time I do these videos, the poisons will fall off. I know you guys have been raging. It's like, you got no poisons on. What poisons do we use? Well, you want deadly poison and your defensive poison, whichever that should be. It should be leeching poison, I think, for most of you. If not, whatever your defensive poison of choice is. What about AoE? Sub is one of the worst for AoE. It really is. Unless we have sort of 6 or 7 mobs, we're just single targeting. It's going to be the best opportunity for us to DPS is to single target. If we have 6 or 7 mobs, then we're going to go into the classic Fan of Knives spam. And then we're going to use the Crimson Tempest when we get those combo points up. Go Crimson Tempest. Like that. And that's going to debuff those. So you can see the 9 seconds of Crimson Tempest is giving us that opportunity in order to pull off tremendous amounts of damage. Because we're getting that 20% damage buff from Sanguinary Vein. Pretty cool, you can see. All very good. All very useful, all very powerful. You can see how many combo points I was generating there with all those crits going on at the same time. I was able to spam AoE. So if we have lots and lots of mobs, we are going to do tremendous amounts of AoE. We really are. When a lot of crits start going off, you can see how quickly we start building our combo points. Make sure you keep your auto attacks going on the one mob. And preferably, you need to keep up your Slice and Dice to keep that energy recuperation going. But you should have no problem with combo points when you're in your dungeons whatsoever with everybody else critting. That being said, that's your sub rogue, guys. That's your sub rogue. There's only one macro I think you should be aware of. And that is this one. Is /cast pre-med /cast ambush. Pre-med gives you extra combo points before you attack the boss. Let me show you premeditation real quickly. Premeditation requires stealth. When used, adds 2 combo points to your target. You must add to or use those combo points within 18 seconds. You're going to be using ambush as soon as you go into stealth, so I would make a macro that makes sure you're using the best use of pre-med. Show tooltip ambush, you can see there, I'll zoom in on it for you. Pre-med and ambush. Just make sure it's a non-factor for you while you're DPSing. You're making best use of all your cooldowns. Alright, ballers, there's sub for you. Let's jump into a dungeon and see what's going on.